Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any Watchbox watch. Reach out to me directly for pricing. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we're discussing a 2021 launch. Better late than never. It's the Omega Seamaster Diver 300-meter Tokyo 2020. Now, of course, the Tokyo Summer Olympics were held in 2021 for reasons that do not bear repeating. But this watch, nevertheless, remains a 2020 commemorative edition, and it even says so on the reverse side. It's built on the basic current generation Diver 300-meter platform launched in 2018, which means 42 millimeters in diameter in stainless steel, 13.7 millimeters thick, 50 millimeters from lug to lug, and then there's a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now we'll throw this on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, and you can see it actually wears a little bit more compact than the previous 41 millimeter watch, and that's because the end links of the bracelet have pivoted interlock with the bracelet itself. You can see these little intermediate links pivot straight down, so there's no fight and flare like there used to be with the extended end links. So we have a watch that's bigger but fits a little bit better on a small wrist. Now you can see it's suitable for most cuffs. You're not going to have too many problems here with a tight dress sleeve, and it'll fit underneath just about any jacket. You can see that I probably have a good deal of clearance on each side. I could probably wear this watch on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. The bracelet design is a established classic that's been with this model line since the first Diver 300 meter in 1993, but it has changed over the years. You still have the polished intermediates, the staggered alignment, staggered size, the satin contrast with the polished intermediates. But what's changed is the construction. Now removable links are fixed by screws, and you can see there's a half link built in. And the bracelet has slightly more squared off outer links that make it look sportier. The original had rolled links. They were sort of rolled off. They had tumble home off to the side that made them look a bit dressier. This is a sportier take on the long-running bracelet. The clasp is of thick gauge steel, polished and setinated, twin trigger release. It has two different degrees of articulation. So if you want to extend, you've got the fold-out dive extension, which is nicely milled, again, from thick gauge steel. And then we've got this incremental slider with a push button, and that's 9.6 millimeters of incremental adjustment. So you have two different ways of extending if you want to wear this over a dive suit, wetsuit, dry suit, or even a thick winter coat. And of course, you have more removable links on the other side. Familiar case design, we've known it since the early 1960s, the so-called lyre-style double-beveled lugs, and we've seen it across many Seamasters and Speedmasters. A little bit of a polished bevel that extends and expands across the edge of the lug, and then longitudinal satin finish on the side. We have a screw-down crown with polished crown guards, 300 meters water-resistant, and a helium escape valve, which, unlike previous generations, now has a conical profile, and unlike previous generations, can now be opened while you're in the midst of a dive, still underwater. It will release helium that may build up inside the watch during saturation diving. We still have the familiar shallow knurling on this bezel, which means, in my experience, it's best to set the bezel before you and the watch get wet. As a result of the relatively shallow plane of this knurling, it can be somewhat difficult to grip if your hands are wet, so set it beforehand. We have a ceramic insert for scratch resistance. This one is blue, and you can see it features cold enamel fill for the numerals and the indices. Let's listen. It has a sharp and precise 120 click action. You can line up the luminescent pearl with the minute hand, and now you have a 0 to 60 minute count up timer for diving or whatever you may be timing. As you can see, we have differential lume. The dial is blue, but the minute hand and the bezel pearl are green to allow easy differentiation at night or in the dark of a dive. Taking a quick look at the dial, you can see that the Omega Wave came back for this generation. This combination for the Tokyo 2020, the white ceramic dial and the blue ceramic insert, particularly striking. Now, the dial was a wave dial from 1993 to 2011. Then 2012 came a new lacquered dial, and Omega did away with the wave until 2018 when it came back. Now it's actually laser cut into the dial, and the dial, as you'll note from the little chemical formula for zirconium oxide, it is now ceramic, so it gives you that glossy, tarnish resistant almost wet paint look that you get with enamel, but it's not fragile or expensive like enamel. Now, the date for this model moves from 3 down to 6 o'clock for the current Diver 300 meter. We have all blue applique indices, blued hands. This model of Seamaster, sometimes known as the James Bond, because this combination of wave dial, case shape, bracelet design, and of course the skeleton hands rose to fame during the 90s and early 2000s on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan when he was Agent 007. So we have a higher grade dial than he ever would have known, as all of these indices are applique. The dial is now ceramic, 2 subsidiary setting modes, one hacking or stop seconds, the other is the quick set date, which allows you to rapidly cycle the date. The watch beats away at 25,200 vibrations per hour, which is the Swatch Group's rate for silicone hairsprings, and the watch has that, a silicone hairspring for effectively amagnetic resistance. The nice thing about this watch is that it has greater than 15,000 Gauss anti-magnetic qualities, which effectively makes it amagnetic, not anti-magnetic. It is immune against shock. It has a full balance bridge with a free-sprung index to brace it against shock. It also features a rotor bearing rather than a jeweled staff for the winding rotor, and it uses ceramic ball bearings for high efficiency. The watch has a 55-hour power reserve. It has coaxial escapement. It pivots on 35 joules. And it is a master chronometer, which means that this watch has gone through the METAS test, a standard developed by Omega and the Swiss Federal Institute of Metrology that tests the fully cased-up watch, yes, as a chronometer, but in 6 positions, not just 5, as a fully assembled watch, not as a bare caliber, and it also includes winding efficiency, power reserve, shock resistance, water resistance, and of course anti-magnetism. It's a much more comprehensive test of the complete watch than the COSC test. This watch, with the coaxial escapement, continues the legacy of George Daniels and his most famous horological innovation. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.